Dr. Lisa Morgan stared at the empty coffee cup on her kitchen table and wondered how everything had gone so wrong so fast. 6 months ago, she had been one of the most respected scientists in the world. She worked at the Pacific Research Institute in California, where she studied how different species could talk to each other. Her work was important and exciting, and she loved every minute of it. Now she sat alone in a small cabin in the mountains of Montana with nothing but silence and regret for company. The government had taken everything from her. They said her research was too dangerous and shut down her whole program without warning. One day she was leading a team of 12 brilliant scientists, and the next day she was escorted out of the building by security guards, who would not even let her take her personal photos from her desk. Lisa had spent 10 years developing new ways for humans to communicate with animals, and maybe someday with alien life, if it existed. She created computer programs that could translate different types of sounds and movements into patterns that made sense. Her team had successfully taught dolphins to use simple sign language, and had even gotten responses from some deep space radio signals that seemed to be organized to be natural noise. But the government officials who came to shut her down said she was playing with fire. They said her work could be used by enemies to hurt America, or that it might attract the wrong kind of attention from space. Lisa tried to explain that science was about discovery and understanding, but they would not listen. They took all her research files and computers, and told her that everything she had worked on was now classified at the highest levels. The worst part was not losing her job. The worst part was losing her family. Her husband Jake had been supportive. At first, when the government people came, he told Lisa that they would get through it together, and that she could find new work somewhere else. But as the weeks passed, and no one would hire her because of her security problems, Jake started to change. He began staying late at his own job, and coming home tired and angry. He stopped asking Lisa about her day, and stopped listening when she tried to talk about finding new research opportunities. Their 8-year-old daughter Emma sensed the tension and started having nightmares and problems at school. The final fight happened on a Tuesday night in March. Jake came home from work and found Lisa at her computer, trying to recreate some of her lost research from memory. He exploded with anger and said he could not live with someone the government considered dangerous. He said he had to think about Emma's future, and that maybe Lisa's career was more important to her than her own family. Lisa tried to explain that she was only trying to rebuild her life, and that her work had always been about helping humanity understand its place in the universe. But Jake was already packing his bags. Within a week, he had filed for divorce and taken Emma to live with his parents in Seattle. The custody hearing was brutal and quick. Jake's lawyer painted Lisa as an unstable person who put her obsession with aliens above her own child's safety. The judge awarded Jake full custody with supervised visits for Lisa once a month. Lisa sat in that courtroom and watched her whole world collapse. Her career was gone. Her husband was gone. Her daughter was gone. She had nothing left except the small cabin in Montana that her grandmother had left her in the will. So, Lisa packed what little she had left and drove north through 3 states until she reached the remote cabin, surrounded by pine trees and mountains. The cabin was basic but comfortable, with 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, and a living room with a stone fireplace. There was no internet, and cell phone service was spotty, but Lisa found that she preferred the silence. She spent her days hiking the mountain trails and trying to forget about the life she had lost. Sometimes she would sit by the small stream behind the cabin and remember the excitement she used to feel when her team made a new discovery. Other times she would call Emma on the 1 day per week that Jake allowed it and tried to sound happy and normal, even though her heart was breaking. The money from selling her house in California would last about a year if she was careful. After that, she would need to find some kind of work, but she had no idea what someone with her background could do. When the government had made her unemployable in her field, maybe she could teach high school science in some small town that did not care about security clearances. Lisa often wondered if she had made the right choices in her career. Maybe she should have studied something safer like regular biology or chemistry. Maybe she should have listened to the warnings from other scientists who said that some knowledge was too dangerous to pursue. But deep down she knew she could not have done anything differently, because asking questions about the unknown was simply who she was. On quiet evenings, she would sit on the cabin's small porch and look up at the stars. She wondered if there really was intelligent life out there somewhere, and if her research had been getting close to something important. The government's reaction suggested that maybe she had been on the right track, but now she would never know for sure. The isolation was both punishment and medicine. Lisa hurt every day from missing Emma and regretting the choices that had cost her everything, but she also felt a strange peace in the mountains. For the first time in years, she was not rushing to meetings or writing grant proposals or managing a team. She could think clearly and remember why she had become a scientist in the first place. It was the love of discovery that had driven her to study animal communication and dream about contact with other worlds. That love was still there, buried under all the pain and loss. Lisa did not know if she would ever get a chance to use her knowledge again, but she was not ready to give up completely. Something inside her said that her story was not over yet, and that maybe losing everything was just the first step toward finding something even more important. The sound that woke Lisa at 3 in the morning was like nothing she had ever heard before. It started as a high whistling noise that seemed to come from everywhere at once, and then became a deep metallic screech that made her teeth hurt. The cabin shook and dishes rattled in the kitchen as something large crashed into the mountainside about 3 miles away. Lisa sat up in bed and listened to the echoes bouncing off the canyon walls. Her first thought was that a military plane had gone down, but the sound had been all wrong for that. It was too musical and too strange, like metal singing as it broke apart. She grabbed her flashlight and looked out the bedroom window, but could only see darkness and trees. Common sense told her to stay in the cabin until morning, and then maybe call the park rangers if she could get a cell signal. But curiosity had always been stronger than common sense in Lisa's life, and tonight was no different. She put on her hiking boots and jacket and packed her emergency kit with first aid supplies, water, and high-energy food bars. The night air was cold and filled with the smell of pine trees and something else she could not identify. It was sharp and metallic, like ozone after lightning, but with an underlying sweetness that reminded her of flowers. Lisa followed her flashlight beam along the trail that led toward the crash site and tried not to think about all the reasons this was a bad idea. The forest was unusually quiet as she hiked. No owls hooted, and no small animals rustled in the underbrush. Even the wind seemed muted, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Lisa had spent enough time in these mountains to know that this kind of silence usually meant predators were nearby, but she kept walking anyway. After an hour of steady climbing, she saw a strange blue glow filtering through the trees ahead. The light pulsed slowly like a heartbeat and grew brighter as she got closer. When Lisa finally reached the source of the crash, she stopped walking and stared in complete amazement at what lay before her. The wreckage was not from any aircraft she had ever seen. Twisted pieces of what looked like crystal and metal were scattered across a clearing where several large trees had been knocked down. The material seemed to glow from within with that same blue light and made soft chiming sounds when the wind touched it. But the wreckage was not what made Lisa forget how to breathe. Trapped beneath the largest piece of debris was something that could only be described as a dragon. The creature was huge, at least 12 feet tall, with scales that shifted color from deep purple to bright silver as the light hit them. It had 4 powerful legs, 2 massive wings that were folded awkwardly against its sides, and a long neck topped by a head that was both beautiful and terrifying. Lisa's scientific mind tried to process what she was seeing while her survival instincts screamed at her to run. Dragons were not real. They were myths and stories and movie special effects. But the evidence of her eyes could not be denied. The creature was breathing slowly and seemed to be unconscious or badly hurt. A dark substance that looked like liquid. Starlight was leaking from a deep gash along its left side. She stood frozen for several minutes, trying to decide what to do. The rational part of her brain said this was probably some kind of hallucination brought on by stress and isolation. But the scientist in her was already noticing details and asking questions. The creature's breathing pattern was steady and regular. Its scales reflected light in a way that suggested they were not just colored but actually producing their own illumination. Most importantly, the wound was clearly causing it pain even in its unconscious state. Lisa had spent her career studying how different species communicated, and she had always believed that intelligence could take many forms. If this creature was intelligent, then it deserved help regardless of what it was or where it came from. She approached slowly with her hands visible and her movements careful and non-threatening. When she was about 10 feet away, the dragon's eyes suddenly opened and fixed on her with startling intensity. They were golden amber and far too knowing for any animal Lisa had ever encountered. She expected fear or aggression, but instead felt something impossible happening inside her mind. The voice that spoke to her was not heard with her ears, but felt directly in her thoughts. It was deep and musical, and spoke perfect English with an accent she could not place. "Please do not be afraid," the voice said. "I am injured and cannot move, but I mean you no harm." Lisa's knees went weak, and she had to sit down on a fallen log to keep from collapsing. Telepathic communication was something she had theorized about in her research, but had never experienced. The sensation was overwhelming and wonderful, and terrifying all at the same time. "What are you?" she managed to whisper out loud. "My name is Keth, and I am what your stories call a dragon, though we call ourselves the Drakniri," the voice in her mind replied. "I am a refugee from a world that is dying, and I came here seeking sanctuary. My ship was damaged during entry to your atmosphere and I crashed." Lisa looked around at the glowing wreckage and realized that what she had taken for twisted metal and crystal was actually the remains of a spacecraft. Her mind reeled with the implications. Not only was she talking to an alien being, but that being looked exactly like the dragons from human mythology and legends. "Why do you look like our dragons?" she asked. Keth's mental voice carried what sounded like amusement. "Perhaps the better question is why your ancestors remembered us so clearly in their stories. My people visited this world long ago, but we left when humanity was still young. Some humans saw us, and the memory became legend." The dragon tried to shift position and made a sound of pain that Lisa felt as much as heard. The wound in its side was getting worse, and the strange luminous blood was flowing more freely. Lisa's medical training from her research work with animals took over, and she moved closer with her first aid kit. "Let me help you," she said. "I know some basic medical techniques. You would help me even though you do not know what I am, or why I came here?" Keth asked with surprise in his mental voice. Lisa was already examining the wound and trying to figure out how to treat it. "You're hurt and intelligent, and you asked for help," she said. "That's enough for me." As she worked to clean and bandage the gash with supplies from her kit, Lisa felt Keth's presence in her mind grow stronger. It was not invasive or frightening, but warm and grateful, like being near a fire on a cold night. For the first time in months, she felt like she was doing something that mattered and using her skills for their intended purpose. "What did you mean when you said you were seeking sanctuary?" she asked as she worked. The dragon's mental voice grew sad and tired. "My people have been at war for many generations with others who believe the galaxy belongs only to them. Our world is dying and we need new places to live, but everywhere we go we are seen as monsters or conquerors. I came here hoping to find allies who might understand that not all who are different are enemies." 3 weeks passed in what felt like both a dream and the most real experience of Lisa's life. She had moved Keth to a large cave system, about half a mile behind her cabin, where he could rest and heal without being seen by any passing hikers or aircraft. The cave was deep and had a natural spring that provided fresh water, and the entrance was hidden by thick bushes and fallen rocks. Every morning, Lisa would pack supplies and medical equipment and make the short hike to check on her patient. Keth's wound was healing remarkably fast, thanks to what he explained was advanced drachnary biology. But he was still too weak to attempt repairing his crashed ship. The wreckage remained scattered in the distant clearing, slowly losing its blue glow as its power systems died. During the long hours of recovery, Keth shared stories of his world and his people that challenged everything Lisa thought she knew about the universe. The Drachnari were an ancient race that had traveled between the stars for thousands of years. They were scholars and artists and builders who created beautiful cities and preserved knowledge from dozens of worlds they had encountered. But they were also warriors when they needed to be, because the galaxy was not a peaceful place. There was an alliance of species called the Hegemony that believed only certain types of life forms deserved to survive and spread among the stars. The Hegemony saw the Drachnari as dangerous because they were powerful and because they helped younger species develop technology and defend themselves. The war has gone on for so long that most of my people have forgotten what peace looks like, Keth explained during one of their conversations. We fight to protect ourselves and others, but each battle costs us more than we can afford to lose. Our homeworld is dying from the environmental damage of weapons testing and industrial production to support the war effort. Lisa found herself fascinated not just by the stories but by the way Keth told them. His mental voice could convey emotions and images, along with words, so she could actually see glimpses of the crystal cities of his homeworld and feel the sadness of his people as they watched their planet slowly die. It was like having a direct connection to experiences that no human had ever shared. "Why did you come to Earth?" she asked one afternoon as she changed the bandages on his side. "What made you think humans might be willing to help?" Keth's large amber eyes focused on her with an intensity that was both gentle and penetrating. "Because of your work, Dr. Morgan. We have been monitoring your world's radio and internet communications for many years, and your research into interspecies communication marked your species as potentially ready for contact." Lisa almost dropped the medical tape she was holding. "You know about my research. We know about all scientific advances that might indicate a species is developing beyond its homeworld mentality," Keth replied. "Your communication protocols were particularly interesting because they showed that humans were thinking about how to talk to minds that work differently from your own. That kind of thinking is essential for peaceful coexistence in a galaxy full of diverse intelligences." Lisa sat back on her heels and stared at the dragon. "But my work was shut down. The government said it was too dangerous, and that concerned us greatly," Keth admitted. "When your research was classified and you were removed from your position, it suggested that humanity might not be ready for contact after all. Fear and suspicion are the tools the hegemony uses to turn species against each other. We had hoped humans would choose curiosity and cooperation instead." Over the following days, Lisa learned that her terminated research had been far more important than anyone on Earth realized. The mathematical models she had developed for translating between different types of communication were almost identical to the universal protocols used by peaceful species throughout the galaxy. Her work on interpreting complex signal patterns was exactly what would be needed for humans to participate in interstellar communication networks. "You were so close to breakthrough discoveries that would have changed everything for your species," Keth told her. "The signals your team detected from space were not random. They were messages from the consortium of peaceful worlds, inviting Earth to make contact when you were ready." Lisa felt a mixture of pride and bitter regret. Her life's work had been leading toward the most important discovery in human history. But the very people who should have supported her had destroyed it instead. She thought about all the opportunities that had been lost, and all the knowledge that might have helped humanity avoid the mistakes that other species had made. But as she spent more time with Keth, she began to understand that maybe losing her old life had been necessary for finding her true purpose. The government officials who had shut down her research would never have allowed her to make contact with an alien species. They would have turned Keth into a prisoner, or a weapon, or worse. Only by being cast out and isolated had she been free to make the choice to help. Keth seemed to sense her thoughts because his mental presence grew warmer and more comforting. Loss often precedes discovery, Lisa. My people have a saying that translates roughly to the idea that you must empty your hands before you can grasp something new. You lost your career and your family, but you gained the freedom to act according to your conscience. But what difference can one person make? Lisa asked. Even if I help you recover and repair your ship, what happens then? I'm just a disgraced scientist living in a cabin. I can't speak for all of humanity. You underestimate the power of individual choice, Keth replied. Every great change in history started with one person deciding to act differently. Your decision to help me despite the risks shows the kind of courage that leaders are made of. And you may not speak for your species officially, but you understand them better than most. As Keth grew stronger, he began teaching Lisa things that no human textbook contained. He showed her how to recognize different types of energy signatures that indicated the presence of advanced technology. He explained the basic principles of faster-than-light travel and how his people navigated between star systems. Most importantly, he shared the fundamental laws that governed peaceful contact between species. The most important rule is consent, he explained. No species has the right to force contact on another, even if we believe we could help them or that they would benefit from joining the galactic community. We must wait for them to choose to reach out first. That is why your research was so significant. It showed that humanity was beginning to think beyond your own world. Lisa realized that she was receiving an education that would have taken human scientists decades to achieve on their own. But more than that, she was developing a friendship with a being whose perspective on the universe was both completely alien and surprisingly familiar. Keth's values of curiosity, compassion, and respect for other forms of life were the same ideals that had driven her own scientific career. What happens when you're fully healed? She asked one day as they worked together to repair some of the electronic components from his ship. Will you try to contact your people? Keth paused in his work and looked at her with an expression she had learned to recognize as deep thought. That depends on what you think your species is ready for. I came here seeking sanctuary, but I found something much more valuable. I found a human who represents the best of what your people could become. The question now is whether you're willing to help me send a message that could change the future of both our worlds. Lisa felt her heart rate increase as she realized what he was suggesting. You want to make formal contact. I want to give humanity a choice, Keth corrected. The same choice my people were never given when the hegemony decided we were too dangerous to exist. Your species can remain isolated and safe on your one world, or you can join a community that spans the galaxy. But the choice must be yours to make freely and with full knowledge of what it means. Lisa stared at the strange device that Keth had assembled from pieces of his crashed ship and components they had built together over the past week. It looked like a sculpture made of crystal and metal that hummed with barely contained energy. According to Keth, this transmitter could send a message across the galaxy using principles of physics that human science was still centuries away from understanding. Are you certain this is what you want to do? Keth asked for the third time. That morning, his large amber eyes showed concern for her safety and her future. Once we send this signal, there will be no way to take it back. Your government will know that contact has been made, and they will come looking for answers. Lisa nodded and checked the connections one more time. They had spent days writing the message that would announce humanity's readiness for peaceful contact with other species. It was part scientific data showing Earth's level of technological development, part cultural exchange, including music and art and literature, and part invitation, asking for dialogue rather than conquest. I've thought about this every day since you told me what my research really meant, she said. Humanity deserves a chance to make this choice for themselves. instead of having it made for them by politicians and military leaders who are afraid of everything they don't understand. If I don't send this message now, that chance might never come again. The signal they were preparing would reach the consortium of peaceful worlds within hours, thanks to the faster-than-light communication technology built into the transmitter. But it would also be detected by Earth's monitoring stations and probably trigger panic among world governments, who had no idea that first contact was even possible. Lisa had insisted on taking full responsibility for the transmission. She recorded a personal message explaining who she was and why she had chosen to reach out to the galaxy on behalf of her species. She talked about her research into communication between different forms of life and her belief that intelligence and consciousness could take many shapes throughout the universe. My name is Dr. Lisa Morgan, and I am a human from the planet Earth, a recorded voice said. I am sending this message to any peaceful civilizations who might be listening, because I believe that my species is ready to join the larger community of intelligent life in our galaxy. We are young and we make mistakes, but we are also curious and capable of growth and change. She went on to explain that humans had developed technology for space travel and global communication, and that they were beginning to search for signs of life beyond their own world. She acknowledged that humanity had problems with war and environmental destruction, but emphasized their capacity for cooperation and their desire to learn from others. The most important part of the message was her explanation of the communication protocols she had developed during her terminated research. She included the mathematical formulas and translation matrices that could allow different species to understand each other despite having completely different ways of thinking and perceiving reality. These protocols are our gift to any species willing to engage in peaceful dialogue, she said in the recording. They represent our understanding that communication is the foundation of cooperation, and that cooperation is the only way forward for any intelligent species that hopes to survive and thrive in a dangerous universe. Keth had added his own section to the transmission that vouched for humanity's potential, and requested that the consortium consider Earth for membership in their alliance. He explained how Lisa had found and helped him despite having no reason to trust him, and how her actions demonstrated the kind of character that was essential for galactic citizenship. The human who aided me represents the best qualities of her species, his part of the message said. She chose compassion over fear and cooperation over suspicion, even when doing so put her at personal risk. If her people can produce individuals like this, then they deserve the chance to prove themselves worthy of our friendship and alliance. On the morning they planned to send the signal, Lisa woke before dawn and hiked to the cave where Keth was waiting with the transmitter fully charged and ready. The device was beautiful in the early morning light, casting rainbow patterns on the cave walls and filling the air with a sound like distant singing. There is one more thing you should know before we do this, Keth said as Lisa made final adjustments to the recording equipment. The response will not come from my people alone. The consortium includes representatives from dozens of species, and they will want to see proof that humanity can be trusted with advanced technology and galactic secrets. Lisa felt her stomach tighten with nervousness, but her resolve remained firm. What kind of proof? They will send ships to Earth orbit and request permission to make contact with your leaders, Keth explained. If your governments respond with hostility or try to capture the ships, then the offer will be withdrawn, and your world will be quarantined until you demonstrate that you have evolved beyond such primitive reactions. And if they respond peacefully, then humanity will be invited to send representatives to the consortium homeworld, where you will begin the process of learning about galactic civilization and determining what role your species might play in it. Lisa took a deep breath and activated the transmitter. The crystal components began to glow brighter, and the humming sound increased in pitch until it was almost beyond human hearing. According to the readings on Ket's instruments, the message was being converted into the exotic energy patterns that would carry it across space faster than light itself could travel. Signal transmitted successfully. Keth announced after several minutes of watching his displays. The message is now traveling to 13 different star systems where consortium monitoring stations will receive it and forward it to the appropriate authorities. Lisa sat down on the cave floor and realized that she had just changed the course of human history. In a few hours, every major government on Earth would detect the transmission and know that someone had made unauthorized contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The consequences for her personally would probably be severe, but she found that she did not care about that anymore. "How long before we get a response?" she asked. "If the consortium decides to respond, it should take no more than 2 of your days," Keth replied. "The ships they send for first contact missions are much faster than my damaged scout vessel. They spent the rest of the day dismantling the transmitter and hiding the components in different parts of the cave system. If government agents came looking for evidence of the transmission, they would find nothing but a woman and an injured alien taking shelter in the mountains." Lisa also recorded several additional messages explaining her actions and her hopes for humanity's future that she could release to the media if necessary. That evening she sat outside her cabin and looked up at the stars with new eyes. Somewhere out there among those distant lights were civilizations that had been waiting for humanity to grow up enough to join them. Other species that had solved the problems of war and environmental destruction and learned to live in harmony with each other and their environments. The next morning, Lisa woke to the sound of jets flying overhead. She counted at least 6 military aircraft circling the area at high altitude and knew that the government had traced the signal to its source. It would not be long before helicopters arrived with teams of agents and soldiers who would want answers. She was not sure. She was ready to give, but as she made coffee and prepared for what was coming, she felt a deep sense of peace. For the first time since losing her career and family, she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The choice she had made might cost her everything, but it had also given humanity something priceless, the opportunity to determine its own destiny among the stars. Her phone had no signal as usual, but she could see news helicopters joining the military aircraft overhead. The story was already breaking on global media, and within hours, the whole world would know that first contact had been made. The reaction would be chaotic and frightening for many people, but it would also be exciting and hopeful for others who had always believed that humanity was not alone in the universe. The response came exactly 43 hours after Lisa had sent the signal, and it was more dramatic than either she or Keth had expected. 4 massive starships appeared in Earth's orbit simultaneously, each one representing a different member species of the Consortium of Peaceful Worlds. The ships were beautiful and terrifying at the same time, clearly advanced beyond anything humans had ever built, but also obviously designed for peaceful rather than military purposes. Lisa first learned about the ships from the emergency broadcasts that interrupted every television and radio station on the planet. She was sitting in her cabin drinking morning coffee when every electronic device she owned started blaring the same message. "This is an emergency broadcast from the Global Defense Network. Unidentified objects have appeared in Earth orbit. All citizens are advised to remain calm and stay indoors until further notice." Through her small battery-powered radio, she heard reports from news stations around the world as astronomers and government officials tried to make sense of what they were seeing. The ships were enormous, some as large as cities, and they maintained perfect formation about 400 miles above Earth's surface. They were not responding to any communication attempts from ground control, but they were also not making any aggressive moves. Within hours, Lisa's remote location became the center of a global crisis. Military helicopters landed in the meadow near her cabin, and soldiers in full combat gear surrounded the area. Black SUVs arrived carrying government officials in expensive suits who looked like they had not slept in days. News crews set up equipment on every available piece of flat ground, and satellite trucks lined the narrow mountain road. The official, who knocked on Lisa's door, introduced himself as Director Paul Harris, from the Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs, a government agency that Lisa had never heard of before, but which apparently had been preparing for this moment for decades. He was a tired-looking man in his 50s, with gray hair and the kind of serious expression that came from carrying too many secrets. "Dr. Morgan, we need to talk," he said as he stepped into her small living room, followed by two younger agents, who immediately began scanning the area with electronic devices. "We detected a transmission originating from this location 2 days ago, and now we have 4 alien spacecraft sitting above our planet. I think you can understand why we might want some answers." Lisa had prepared for this moment, but she still felt her heart racing as she faced the consequences of her choice. "I sent a message to peaceful alien civilizations, announcing that humanity was ready for contact. I used communication protocols from my own research, combined with technology provided by a refugee who crashed in these mountains 3 weeks ago." Director Harris sat down heavily in one of her kitchen chairs and rubbed his face with both hands. "A refugee? You mean there's already an alien on Earth? His name is Keth, and he's from a species called the Drachneri," Lisa said. "His ship was damaged when he entered our atmosphere, and I've been helping him recover from his injuries. He told me about the galactic community and convinced me that humanity deserved a chance to join it." The director looked around the cabin, as if expecting to see a dragon hiding behind the furniture. "Where is this alien now?" "In a safe place where he won't be hurt by people who are afraid of what they don't understand," Lisa replied firmly. "He came here seeking sanctuary, not to invade or conquer. The ships in orbit are here because I invited them." Over the next several hours, Lisa found herself at the center of the most important diplomatic crisis in human history. World leaders called on secure phone lines demanding explanations. Military commanders wanted to know if the alien ships posed a threat. Scientists begged for any information that might help them understand the technology they were witnessing. But the aliens themselves remained silent until exactly 72 hours after their arrival. Then every communication device on Earth received the same message simultaneously, transmitted in hundreds of human languages, with perfect grammar and pronunciation. "Greetings to the people of Earth," the message began. "We are representatives of the Consortium of Peaceful Worlds, responding to an invitation from one of your scientists. We come not as conquerors or judges, but as potential friends, offering your species a choice that will determine your future among the stars." The alien message explained that they had been monitoring human development for many years, and had been impressed by humanity's creativity, resilience, and capacity for growth. But they had also been concerned by humanity's tendency toward violence and environmental destruction. The communication protocols developed by Dr. Lisa Morgan had shown them that at least some humans were ready to think beyond their own planet. "We offer your species membership in our alliance of peaceful worlds," the message continued. "This membership would bring access to advanced technology, interstellar travel, and knowledge gathered from dozens of civilizations across the galaxy. But it would also require that you commit to resolving conflicts through dialogue rather than violence, and that you take responsibility for healing the environmental damage to your homeworld." The most important part of the message was the condition that the aliens placed on their offer. They would only proceed with formal contact if every nation on Earth agreed to participate, not a majority vote or a decision by the most powerful countries, but unanimous consent from all of humanity. "We learned long ago that divided species cannot succeed in galactic civilization," the message explained. "If your people cannot agree to work together for this opportunity, then you are not ready for the responsibilities that come with it. We will give you 1 full year to reach a decision. If at the end of that time you have achieved unanimous agreement, we will begin the process of integration. If not, we will withdraw, and your world will remain isolated until you demonstrate that you have evolved beyond your current limitations." Lisa listened to the message along with the rest of humanity and realized that her decision to send the signal had started something much bigger than she had imagined. The choice was no longer just about whether Earth wanted contact with aliens. It was about whether the human species could overcome its differences and unite around a common goal. For the first time in its history, Director Harris and his team had set up a command center in Lisa's cabin, where they monitored reactions from around the world. The response was exactly as chaotic as anyone could have expected. Some countries immediately announced their support for joining the consortium. Others demanded more information before making any commitments. A few declared the whole thing an elaborate hoax or a trick by their enemies. Religious leaders debated whether the aliens were angels, demons, or something else entirely. Scientists formed committees to study every word of the alien message for hidden meanings. Military leaders argued about whether the ships represented a threat that needed to be eliminated regardless of their peaceful claims. But gradually something remarkable began to happen. As the weeks passed and the alien ships remained peacefully in orbit, more and more people began to see the opportunity rather than the threat. Young people especially embraced the idea of joining a galactic community and gaining access to technologies that could solve problems like climate change and poverty. Lisa found herself reluctantly thrust into the role of humanity's unofficial ambassador to the aliens. She was the only person who had actually communicated with one of them, and her story became the foundation for everything humanity knew about the consortium and their intentions. Television networks from around the world sent reporters to interview her. She appeared before emergency sessions of the United Nations and spoke with heads of state who wanted to understand what kind of beings they were dealing with. Through it all, she tried to convey the sense of hope and possibility that her friendship with Keth had given her. "They're not so different from us," she told a global audience during one televised address. "They have families and dreams and fears just like we do. The main difference is that they learned long ago that cooperation works better than conflict, and that knowledge grows faster when it's shared rather than hoarded." Keth remained hidden in the cave system, but he began communicating with human leaders through Lisa. He answered questions about consortium technology and culture, and provided detailed explanations of what membership would mean for Earth. His patient responses and obvious intelligence did much to calm fears about alien intentions. The year that followed was unlike anything in human history. Every country on Earth held referendums about joining the consortium. The debates were passionate and sometimes violent as people struggled with the implications of such a momentous decision. Some argued that humanity should remain independent and develop its own technology. Others insisted that the opportunity was too valuable to waste. Religious groups were divided. Some saw the aliens as part of God's plan for humanity, while others viewed them as a test of faith that should be rejected. Scientists overwhelmingly supported contact but disagreed about how fast humanity should adopt alien technology. Environmental groups embraced the chance to learn about sustainable civilization, while others worried about losing human culture and identity. Lisa watched the global discussion with a mixture of pride and anxiety. She had given humanity the choice she believed they deserved, but she could not control what they did with it. Some days the polls showed strong support for joining the consortium, and other days, opposition seemed to be growing. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Emma, Lisa's daughter, now 9 years old, saw her mother on television and convinced her father Jake to let her make contact. The phone call was awkward and emotional, but it led to longer conversations, and eventually to Emma spending a weekend at the cabin, where she met Keth. The dragon was gentle and patient with the curious child, and answered her questions about life among the stars with the same care he had shown Lisa. Emma was not afraid, because children adapt more easily to new ideas than adults do. When she returned home, she told everyone at school about her mother's alien friend, and her story spread through social media faster than any government could control it. Young people around the world began organizing in support of the consortium offer. They pointed out that they would be the ones living with whatever decision their parents made, and they wanted a chance at a future that included the stars. Student protests and youth movements sprang up in every major city, demanding that world leaders think beyond their own lifetimes. The momentum shifted as older generations began to listen to their children and grandchildren. Parents, who had been skeptical about alien contact, started to consider what kind of world they wanted to leave behind. The idea of solving humanity's biggest problems with help from civilizations that had already overcome similar challenges became increasingly attractive. 6 months before the deadline, polls showed that a majority of people in most countries supported joining the consortium. But majority was not enough. The aliens had been clear that they needed unanimous agreement, and several countries remained firmly opposed. North Korea and a few other isolated nations refused to even participate in the discussions. Lisa began to worry that humanity would fail the test, not because most people opposed contact, but because a few governments could not overcome their fear and suspicion. She spent sleepless nights wondering if her decision to send the signal had been a terrible mistake that would leave Earth more divided than ever. But Keth reminded her that the choice itself was as important as the outcome. Even if your species decides to remain isolated, they will have had to work together to reach that decision, he told her. The process of discussing this offer has already changed humanity in ways that will benefit your future development. In the final months before the deadline, something remarkable happened. Countries that had opposed the consortium began to change their positions, not because of pressure from other nations, but because their own people demanded it. The last holdouts were small nations whose leaders finally realized that they could not deny their citizens a voice in humanity's future. When the final vote was tallied with just 3 days remaining before the alien deadline, the result was closer than anyone had expected, but clear enough to satisfy the consortium's requirements. Every nation on Earth had agreed to join the galactic community, though some had done so by margins of less than 1%. Lisa stood outside her cabin on the morning of the announcement and watched as the 4 alien ships began their descent toward landing sites that had been prepared around the world. The largest ship was heading for a field about 10 miles from her location, where representatives from Earth and the consortium would meet for the first time in an official capacity. As she prepared to attend that historic meeting, Lisa thought about everything that had led to this moment. She had lost her career, her marriage, and her old life. But in return, she had gained something infinitely more valuable: the knowledge that one person's choice to act with courage and compassion could change the destiny of an entire species. Keth emerged from the forest behind her cabin for the first time in months, his injuries fully healed and his magnificent form gleaming in the morning sunlight. "Are you ready, Dr. Morgan?" he asked with warmth and gratitude in his mental voice. Lisa smiled and walked beside her friend toward whatever future awaited humanity among the stars. She had given her species the greatest gift possible: the freedom to choose their own path forward. Now, it was time to see where that path would lead.